The best piece of advice that I ever got, an old chef told me once, he said, nobody really cares how much you know until they know how much you care. That's treating your employees right and your people right. Once you've gained their respect by treating them right, you've got a solid foundation to build a business on or build a career on. Treat customers with respect, treat your coworkers with respect, and be concerned for everybody involved, especially the customer.
On this episode, we talk with Chef Stephen Morgan, the Director of Food and Beverage Services of Boyd Gaming and the IP Casino Restaurants in the Biloxi, Mississippi. Chef Morgan walks us through his amazing culinary career that started at the age of 12. Through his schooling at the Culinary Institute of America, earning his chef stripes with Ritz-Carlton, and eventually to reopening the IP Casino and Resort restaurants after Hurricane Katrina. Chef Morgan also gives his best advice on making a restaurant popular, proficient, and profitable. Plus, get your pen ready for some culinary insights into the best coastal comfort food recipes and secrets from a real-world top chef. Well, Stephen, thank you for joining us on the Bottled Up podcast. Stephen, I appreciate you being here today.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
Well, you and I in passing have had conversations a little bit about your history over the years of doing business with each other. And where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and we quickly moved to New Jersey, where my mom's parents got here from Ireland, and they settled in northern New Jersey. But my dad passed away early on. I was about 6 months old, and I grew up in northern New Jersey. As luck would have it, I started working in restaurants at about the age of 12.
Wow.
And I didn't realize I got my start in a little Italian restaurant called Villa d'Esta. It was a little Italian restaurant, northern New Jersey, and I didn't know it, but it was highly rated. It was like a 4 or 5 star Italian restaurant, standalone. And that's where I got my formative years of work.
What was your first job?
Starting out was helping them butcher in the basement, butcher veal, butcher lamb, butcher meats. I was the Irish kid, so I had to clean up everything.
Right.
It turned out to be really lucky for me because I started branching out, 13, 14, 15. I started busting tables. Then I was prepping in the kitchen a little bit, in between washing dishes. They'd let me clean squid. They'd let me chop parsley. They'd let me grate cheese. I did all the grunt work in the kitchen, but I watched a lot. So early on, I wanted to be a chef. I always wanted to be behind that line and working on the saute pans like the old chef Gino was there. His name was Gino Mazza. I'll never forget him. But he taught me a lot. And I always wanted to get to that position. And by 17, I was cooking.
Stephen, as a 12-year-old, how did you decide, or what made you want to start working in a restaurant? What was the catalyst that made you say, hey, I'm going to go work in this restaurant?
Well, it was inside, so it was warm.
Absolutely.
It was after school, and admittedly, sometimes it was during school. But
yeah.
I had to help my mom, and we had to put food on the table. My mom was a single mom raising 2 kids, my sister and I. So I worked any chance I got, and I was kind of pushed in that direction to get out and go get a little money. It wasn't really by choice, but I really enjoyed it. I liked it. There was a need, and it wasn't really legal at the time. I think, it was paid under the table. I think I was making $2.10 an hour cash.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting though, man, that it was out of a necessity that you found your life's calling, right?
I never wavered in that. I think in my high school blurb under your picture with the bad haircut, I said a career as a executive chef lies ahead. And that's what I did. I went after that goal and furthered it. I just never looked back, and I never had a question. I love food. I was taught by a very patient Italian chef. His name was Gino Mazza. He led me down the road of appreciating the animal, appreciating where cheese came from, appreciating the fish, appreciating everything that you had produce-wise and caring about it. That's what hooked me, was that love of food.
Okay, so you worked in this same restaurant, this Italian restaurant, throughout your teenage years, and you graduate from hhigh school. What did you do after that? Did you go to culinary school, or what was your next step?
I was around 17, 18, and all my buddies were going to join the Marine Corps. And I said, well, I'm either going to stay here and cook, or I could, of course, the recruiter was like, sure, you can cook in the Marine Corps and you'd be a mess specialist or whatever it was. And so I was planning on doing that. And it was with three other buddies. Three of them ended up going in, and I got sick. I got spinal meningitis.
Mm.
I was sick. They moved on. They went on with it. And Marine Corps said, no, we can't take you. But what I did do is I put an application into the Culinary Institute of America, which was founded by the Navy.
Okay.
And the Marine Corps is a department of the Navy. So, just from talking to people, they said, well, just apply. And I didn't know how I was going to pay for it, what was going to happen. But it turned out I got some guidance from, a guidance counselor in high school and a couple other people that were instrumental in my life. And they got me to a point where I got a student loan. And because my mom made under a certain threshold, I got a grant from the government. So I had a big fat bill to pay when I got out, but I got accepted to the Culinary Institute of America, and I graduated just as I was right about to turn 20. So it was a great experience, great experience. And then I moved into, I worked in New York City for a while, and then, hopped around the country as a budding chef.
How long were you in New York?
I was in New York probably 2 or 3 years after getting out of the Culinary Institute. I worked in Queens while I was going to the Culinary Institute, and that's it's about the same time as a 4-year college with no breaks, compressed into a little over a 2-year program. Went back, I worked for Intercontinental Hotels. I was a room service cook there, did a little stint in the fine dining restaurant there. And that's kind of what got me into the fine dining piece of it. And from there, I went to back to New Jersey, and I opened a little restaurant that was called Francesco's. And it was for the Tomeno family. Frank Tomeno was the head of the forensic medicine for the state of New Jersey. And he opened this little restaurant out near Gladstone and Peapack. It's a little town called Randolph, New Jersey. It was a quaint little farmhouse that they turned into it was a servant's quarter to I guess like a little resort or farmhouse out there, getaway. And it was a tiny little restaurant, but we opened it up, and we got on the map with the Star Ledger, and New York Times even came out, and we got a little review from them. And it was kind of what launched me.
It's exciting, man. How old were you when that went down?
I was like 22, 23.
Man.
And then, I worked for them for a while, got them situated, ended up hiring my wife.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I hired her to work in the kitchen.
Did you interview her for the position?
No, the manager of the restaurant, Frank, he hired her, and I met her, and she was going to make salads and do the cold food. And next thing you know, I was chasing her to Pennsylvania, and she was finishing out her degree, and I got a job in a good restaurant down in Pennsylvania. And as she graduated, the Ritz-Carlton Hotel was opening up, and I got on the opening team for the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company. And that was a huge part of my development. When I got on with Ritz, we opened the Independence One, which is in Philadelphia between the two towers.
Yeah.
And quickly we were working as a company. We went from 8 to 28 hotels in the next 5-year time period. And I was on the opening team for all those hotels.
So your position was you would go and you would train everyone and then move to the next one, then train everyone and move to the next one, that kind of thing?
I was the hourly trainer until they finally gave me a shot. They gave me a sous chef position. And that was for the opening of Amelia Island, Florida. Amelia Island's a beautiful property.
It is.
And we opened that up, and I was the chef tournant there, which means I did everybody's day off. When the cafe chef was off for 2 days, I took over the cafe. The fine dining chef was off for 2 days. I did that. The steakhouse chef was off. I did that. The butcher was off. I did that. I covered everybody. And there was a lot of large banquets too. So that rounded out my experience, and they chipped all the rough edges off of me at the Ritz-Carlton. I was really fortunate.
I can imagine, Stephen, doing that amount of cooking and doing all those different types of cooking for that amount of folks would polish you up a little bit.
Yeah, it was intense because, at the time, the Ritz-Carlton was the premier hotel company and still is, arguably by many. it just really gave me the opportunity to work for some great chefs. I worked under 2 Michelin-starred chefs. It really gave me a level of exposure and experience to culinary arts that back then in the late 80s, early 90s, that was all the rage. That was where guys like Bourdain were coming up in New York
Yes.
and Daniel Boulud, that whole
rock star chef.
Yeah. Guys like that were coming on board were like Gordon Ramsay, so those superstars of today, I got to kind of rub elbows with some of those guys. We did the leading hotels of the world, and we would have like the Hotel Savoy in London would come to Boston when I was in Boston. We do their menu for 2 weeks, and then we'd go over there and they do our menu for 2 weeks. So it was kind of like an exchange program. Really, really honed my skills, and you had to be on your toes, because if you couldn't cut it, they had 10 guys behind you that wanted that spot.
That's what I was going to ask you. I mean, the competition in this had to have been just fierce, man. And you had to always feel like, that the floor is kind of shattered underneath you. If you don't follow through, you're going to get clipped.
Yeah, it was definitely a learning curve. And I ended up, my last spot I was the dining room chef, and this is about 3 or 4 promotions in. I went from Florida to the flagship hotel in Boston. I was an American chef, which was unusual. And I was the chef de cuisine for the dining room in Boston, which was all silver service, and everything was done tableside, served tableside.
Yes.
So that was a big honor for me, big boost to my career. And then casinos came along.
I was going to ask you about that. Obviously, your experience when it comes to the culinary arts, you went and you did it all. It sounds like you started off, as a kid working in a restaurant, and food's kind of been your entire life. So how did you transition from fine dining, Ritz-Carlton, into getting into kind of the gaming, food and beverage services, designing menus? How did that come about? And what was the first property you were hired onto?
I met a gentleman by the name of Craig Nielsen, who was just inducted into the Hall of Fame for Ameristar Casinos. I met him in Boston at the Ritz, and he was in town seeing a doctor, and he was a customer that would be in there kind of regularly. He had a lot of health issues. He was a quadriplegic, but he was the chief operating officer of Ameristar Casinos out of Nevada, big name. And he kept coming after me. He kept saying, "Come work for me." And, I was like, "Look, man, I'm at the Ritz. This is,
I know.
Food's never going to take off in the casinos." I was like, "They don't have good food in casinos." Well, boy, was I wrong. So he finally made me an offer I could not refuse. And the first casino I worked for, I was on the opening team for the Ameristar Casino in Little Vicksburg, Mississippi. And it was a culture shock, a learning curve, and probably one of the toughest things I ever did in my career for that small property. But it was a jump up, and it was a jump into the big time with casinos. And I stayed with Ameristar for about 6 years, of which we were on opening. So we opened the Iowa property in Council Bluff, Iowa. Then I opened a casino in Las Vegas, which was the Reserve, it was called. And there I started to branch out and meet other people, and ended up leaving Ameristar, going to a different company and opening a casino called Belterra in Indiana as the executive chef and doing the design. And that's where I met some people from culinary design and fixture out of Las Vegas, started to learn how to position things and open things. When we were at Belterra, we did it from the ground up. Great experience, great learning curve for me. I really had a chance to work with some great designers and architects that kind of, showed me, hey, dum-dum, you can cook, but you got the door on backwards on this refrigerator, or you can't get into the kitchen because you're going to knock people over around this corner. They taught me flow and ability to look at a plan and make that space work in real world. And that's really my love now.
The experience of cooking the food, that's completely separate from what you're describing. You're talking about actually designing the space that the guests will eat in and that the staff will cook in, correct?
I had the understanding of what I needed to get the food out and to get it out fast, and to, how many chefs you needed for how many seats and all that. I had that knowledge, but then being able to make a working, functioning kitchen And that was the great part, because unless you know what goes on in a kitchen, you're not going to design it right. You're going to design something generic that you got to force the food out of. They taught me how to design the kitchen to the menu.
Stephen, is in all the jobs that you've had, I mean, and we just went through some incredible history of what you've done from being basically a child into, working for the Ritz-Carlton, then into gaming. What would you consider the worst job to be or to have to do?
I'd say executive sous chef is probably the hardest, especially in a hotel when you have a lot of banquets, because you're responsible for everything that all the underling chefs do or don't do. Quite frankly, the chef is usually out playing golf and you're the guy in charge when he's doing that. If you're at a resort, you get all the blame and none of the glory. It's the hardest job you'll ever hate, but it's a means to getting to that top spot. So executive sous chef is really where you got to take it on the chin for every mistake everybody in the culinary field makes. So you got to be a master of all hats.
Yeah, there's a lot of heat. It sounds like it's kind of like a NCO, like a sergeant or somebody in the military who basically has to lead the men, but all the officers get all the credit for the action, that kind of thing.
Correct. It's like my son's in the Army. He's like, I'm a working man. He's a staff sergeant, so he gets all the blame, none of the glory, and he's got to deal with all the on the heels.
In our business, we have some positions like that where it's like, it's a double-edged sword, right? When you do well, you get a little bit of glass. When you do wrong, that you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, right? So that's interesting to think about that position as far as culinary arts are concerned. What do you think as far as local restaurant owners do? And have you viewed anything that local restaurants owners do, like get wrong or they get right about creating their dining space or kitchen? Have you seen anything out in the world where you're like, people are doing this a lot, they don't need to be doing that?
Well, I can tell you, I'm not going to name places, but there's a little town close to us and there's a new restaurant popping up seems like every month, and one going away and one popping up, and you just see a lot of mistakes that people make. That everybody wants to get in, get the door open, and they have a grandiose menu idea, and then you see that they can't execute it from that space, or this is what I would have done, or this is what you should have done, or this is a health code violation, or I am the worst person in the world to go out to dinner with because I'm critical.
Stephen, do you internalize all that or do you vocalize it? Because I know you a little bit, and I think I might know the answer.
I never vocalize it, never. And I know that that's going to sound weird coming from me. Yeah. I'll vocalize it to who I'm with and drive them out of their mind.
Yeah.
But I won't say anything to the server. I won't say anything to anybody in charge. I just won't come back. And that's who I am. I'll give you a couple of chances. It could have been an off day or something, but I have a very low tolerance for just not doing the fundamental things right.
Yeah, well, you've been in the game, man. You've done what they're doing, and you probably could give them some pretty good advice or tips. But a lot of people don't want to hear that from their customers.
Well, a lot of people nowadays, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but there's a lot of work that goes into gaining the experience and the knowledge to run a restaurant properly and profitably. Right. And unfortunately, a lot of these people, they'll watch a couple of episodes of Chopped or Iron Chef, and they're ready to go. They cook some things in their backyard, and now they're a chef. And next thing you know, they're an owner, and they can't understand why this thing's bleeding or leaking oil and not making any money. Well, it's the experience, that the hard knocks that you go through that teach you how to be profitable and how to be efficient in a restaurant. And you can't just wing it, because the bills got to get paid and the health inspector's got to be on your side, and the customer's got to love what you're doing, and they'll tear you apart if you're not doing everything right.
Yeah, I mean, it's a high risk. Like you're saying, you have to know what you're doing. You mentioned some of the shows on TV. What do you watch the Food Network at home? Is that like constantly? Because I know a buddy of mine's dad, he was into home renovation, and every time he came in, it was HGTV on the TV, and he's just watching HGTV. It was like, it's like the TV he deleted all the other channels.
I'll be honest with you, a lot of the stuff that you see on some of those programs, you see them making mistakes. I can't look at it. My thing is when I'm not there, I don't want to deal with food unless I'm cooking it myself for my family. And I rarely, I'm watching a nature program or something with scuba diving or fishing or something like that. I'm not watching cooking while I'm home.
Got it. What's your favorite thing to cook at home, or what do you consider your best dish to cook at home?
It's still the simple things like homemade pasta, a very simple tomato sauce, like a pot of handmade meatballs and sausage and braciole, and just having the kids come over for Sunday dinner. Very, very simple food. And 9 times out of 10, it's either seafood because of where we live.
Right.
And some Italian or French, a cioppino or like a fish stew or even the Cajun influence. There's nothing wrong with a great pot of gumbo if you do it right, and you put the time into it.
So, how many children do you have? You said you have children.
I've got 3. They are 30, 28, and 25. And 2 sons are my oldest son, Robert. He followed me. He's chefing. He's a chef.
Awesome.
And my other son I mentioned, he's in the United States Army. He's a staff sergeant right now. And he's stateside. Good. Which is good. They just had their first grandbaby. And then my daughter, Kaylee, she's 25 and she's getting married next month. And got her finally through Mississippi State, paid my dues up there. And, it took her a while to figure out what she wanted to do.
My dad paid some bills to Mississippi State as well. So, yeah, I'm a state grad through and through. So hopefully my daughter will follow in your daughter's footsteps. But you're having children during all this, traveling around. Did you have a home base and then you would fly off for a week or 2 at a time? Or how did it all work moving constantly around?
I was terrible. I dragged everybody all over the country. My first son was born in Amelia Island, Florida, which is right near Fernandina Beach, which is where the Ritz-Carlton was and still is. My second son was born, as I mentioned, I was up in Boston. I took that job up there. He was born in Winchester, Mass, which is right by Lowell, Mass, outside of Boston, suburb, bedroom neighborhood of Boston. And then my daughter, Kaylee, was born in Vicksburg when I got into the casino industry. And then I dragged them to Indiana, then Louisiana, and then finally back here. And I promised them I wouldn't move them.
When did you end up on the coast? When did you move here?
I got a call from somebody who I worked with at a previous casino company, John Lucas, and he was at Ameristar for a time, and we crossed paths on one of the openings out in Vegas. But anyway, he called me and he said, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm part of a change at the IP in Biloxi. And I said, well, IP Biloxi, what's that? And I said, you know what? I said, I just had left the Indian casino. I was at the Coshada in Louisiana, and there was a tribal election. And usually that changes the top people. I was vice president of food and beverage at that point there, out of the coat and into the suit. So he called me and he said, are you interested? And I said, you know what? I'm on my way back from Florida. I'll stop. I had the kids and fishing over in Florida. We were just taking a little vacation, camping and fishing. And so I stopped on the way in and he showed me the property. And I said, I don't know, man, this place looks beaten up. But he assured me, we're going to have the best food and we're going to renovate these restaurants. And so I talked about it with my wife and came back, took another look and he romanced me a little bit and took me all over Biloxi. And I really liked the area,
It sucks you in, Stephen,
Yeah, this place is home, man. So I was like, you know what? It'd be cool. I could get a boat. I could, go hunting. I could do all these things here and, in the middle work. So I said, you know what, John, I'll try it out. And I took the job. My first week was the 12th of August. And my first manager on duty watching the place was the weekend of Hurricane Katrina. And when Katrina hit, I was like, I didn't know if I had a job or what. I knew I had to stay here. A lot of people just pulled up and left, but I stayed in the hotel the whole time. I was the MOD and I had people here on oxygen and it was just, it wasn't organized really. And, this thing came out of nowhere. It hit everybody pretty much by surprise. So we buckled down. There was about 50 people in the building. And when it was all over, I said, I got to stay here. This place is devastated. These people need me. So I stayed about 2 weeks, without going home. I still had my family in Louisiana, and we were cooking and taking care of things. And next thing you know, the plan hatched to just renovate this place. There was 2 properties. They sold the IP in Vegas, took all the proceeds, put it into the renovation and the rebuild of this property. And you guys know the history on that. We came back and we opened all new restaurants, and we hired a great executive team, and we repositioned the property. And it was really a silver lining. It was like a phoenix coming out of the ashes of Katrina.
Y'all were the first ones open.
We got open in 125 days.
I remember that we had something a little bit to do with that, with making sure that y'all had everything y'all needed as far as lines and equipment and all that stuff.
That's correct. I remember you guys were running hard lines in the ceiling the day we opened up to the public, because we had added so many bars like that, and we opened up the restaurants were in different positions. So you guys were integral to that whole piece of it. And we were a Pepsi property back then. We stayed with Pepsi, but long story short, it was great. We had a great team here. We had great leadership from the trustees. Ralph Ingolstadt passed away, and it was his long-term lawyer and his long-term accountant that were the trust, along with Betty Ingolstadt, his widow. And they gave us the latitude and the freedom to really shine. And we did that. It was an exciting time.
Yes.
Rebuilt it, 8 restaurants, got rid of all the restaurants, stamped them out dead that were in here, and put in new facilities, new equipment. The buffet was state of the art at that time. And 32, obviously that was the birthplace of 32 that night. And, we just never looked back, and we've constantly evolved. Boyd bought us in 11, and that's been a great run too, because our industry has changed, our economy's changed, our everything's changed over the years from that euphoric time after Katrina. And there's ups and downs and through COVID and everything else, but there's nothing I'd rather do, and there's nowhere I'd rather be than right on this coast.
By the way, I had no idea that your first week here was literally the worst hurricane that's ever hit this area ever. So, you're welcome for that. But we kind of have been running in tandem with one another for the past, how long has it been? It's since 2005. So that would be 17 years. 17
years in August it was.
Throughout all that time, when it comes to us, casinos and properties like that, or anything that has a lot of moving parts and that kind of thing, they mean a lot to us. Our customers mean a lot to us in general. But how do you think it's been working with us?
I first started working with Pepsi with your dad, and I guess you were still in school or getting into the business at that point. He probably had you working stuff in the warehouse. And
I was similar to you, Steven. I started when I was 12. So
he had you working. I know he did. I got introduced by, I think it was some other purveyors that we had with Alliant, and it was early on. And you guys were an integral partner to us getting off the ground. And the thing that has stuck out to me, especially with you, is when I call you, I get something done. The buck stops with you. If I'm struggling with something, or I need something, or it's 8:00 in the morning and something blows up here, you guys are on it. You're sending somebody to our aid, or you got product coming to us if we're out, or you're helping us with a CO2 system that isn't even, your purview, but your guys are there helping us fix it. It's been a great relationship. It's been reciprocal. It's been nothing but a pleasure to deal with Allen Beverage.
I would say, Steven, that I'm really glad that you've been in the same position that you have for these amount of years, because I do know that whenever something goes on at the IP, if I need any help with anything, or if you need any help, like I said, you know what number to call. And I know that since y'all are a national account now, like there are certain protocols, but me and you have kind of bypassed that on certain occasions to get results. And then we'll clean up the clerical paperwork later.
Sure. Yeah.
Things in your business happen fast, especially with restaurants and renovations and that kind of thing. And there's a lot of communication and moving parts that need to happen to make your job work. What do you think through the years As far as working as a food and beverage manager and director of food and beverage services, what do you think has changed the most, and what do you think has remained constant?
Well, what's changed the most is, in my opinion, overall, is information and how quickly things move. Things will pop up and go down very, very quickly as far as trends. And trends are just that. I think trends repeat themselves, but new products and new innovations, I think they're more prevalent now than ever. You just see so much new creativity, and that's a lot of that has to do with all the how fast we learn things now on the internet, how fast
Social
things
media.
spread. Social media, all of that plays into it. If somebody does something fantastic in LA food wise, it spreads like wildfire. Or if there's a new restaurant in New Orleans, everybody, you find out about it. It's like it doesn't take so long to get the information out of there. So yeah, you're always going to have things in the business that have to remain constant. They're traditional, things. It's like having onion soup in a steakhouse. You got to have it. Having a giant shrimp cocktail in a steakhouse, you got to have it. But, I think people have more choices than ever now, and chefs have more creativity than ever now. And it's not just that, but it's what people are drinking and how they're, you guys have seen it over the years, like the seltzer craze and, all of the seltzer based drinks, and then the flavored soft drinks and, waters, huge, tea, huge. So there's this new resurgence of going back to the organic beginnings of either food items or beverage items, and then presenting those differently. And there's so much more creativity out there.
I do think that you are right. Things do go down faster. I mean, you can just be driving on your way to work and at a stoplight, look down, see an email, hit an email back to somebody, and you've already solved a problem in 30 seconds. And you are right. Especially when it comes to food items and different trends that are out in the market. We're seeing it a lot too, with soft drinks and tea and coffee, and everybody's saying that, the new hot flavor this year is going to be mango. Everybody's eating and drinking mango. It's trending, blah, blah, blah. And then you come out with a mango and it hits for a month and a half, and then nobody wants to drink it after that, because then everybody's on cherry. Everybody loves wild cherry. That's trending, and it's a fast paced, fast moving environment. So I totally get it. I was going to ask you another thing, but at the IP right now, is there anything upcoming, any events or shows or anything you would kind of want to showcase and tell everybody that, you need to come to the IP and check this out?
In my world, we are doing some shows and we're continuing to offer entertainment. As we ease back into this off of COVID, there's just the workforce is a little harder to stabilize, and we're doing that right now. We're stabilizing our workforce, but I will tell you, our menus are all getting a facelift right now. Look for in the next 2 weeks, look for our 32 menu to change. And we just got awarded our Wine Spectator Award of Excellence, Best of, again this year. So we've added we freshened up the wine list. We change our menu in 32 seasonally. It's a fall winter menu coming out, and it looks fantastic. And I've had my hand in some of the dishes. So, it's a good time of year for us. We're freshening Tien's menu up. That'll be out next. And then all the menus in the building we're refreshing, including banquets. So it's an exciting time for us. And again, we have to do that because things change so quickly.
Absolutely. Well, Stephen, I appreciate all your time, man. I'm really glad that you decided to come on and kind of tell us your story of getting into the culinary arts and where you've traveled and ended up here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, which is a great place to live, man. I just want to thank you for being on the podcast, and I'm glad that we were able to have this conversation.
My pleasure, sir. My pleasure. You take care.
I will. Chef Morgan is a local rock star chef, and we are fortunate to have him on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. I love hearing Chef Morgan's passion for food, team building, leadership, and delivering a world-class customer dining experience. Chef Morgan is proof that the secret sauce to culinary success is constantly executing at a high level, professionally treating others with respect, and always serving everything with a big side of care. Please do yourself a favor and go check out what Chef Stephen Morgan and his dedicated Boyd Gaming food and beverage team members at the IP Casino are up to with their established and new menus and dishes. Thanks for listening to the Bottled Up Podcast. If you like the show, please subscribe to, rate, and review Bottled Up wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Plus, please share the show with your friends. Want to tell us about a local restaurant, bar, business, or entrepreneur you want us to spotlight? Email us at bottledupshow.com. This show is made possible by the fine people at Allen Beverages. Want to know more about Allen Beverages and how we work with our customers, partners, and vendors and community? Check out allenbeverages.com. That's ALLEN beverages.com. This show was edited and produced by Johnny Glenn at Deep Fried Studios.